Hey SuperMOOCers, welcome to week 5 and our 5th interview. And today we have a really exciting interview. We have one of the, I always say the hottest writers. So you can take that however you want it. In comics today, we have Scott Snyder, and we have read his Batman Zero and his Swamp Thing Zero. And I know that a lot of you are reading his other books. We have a lot of American Vampire fans out there. So we also have a ton of questions, so let's get right to it. And everybody, here's Scott. Welcome to our class.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, we're all really excited to have you here. And what have you been up to lately?
Well, I've been working hard on this new Superman series, Superman Unchained, and also on the big Batman arc we're doing next called Zero Year. So it's been a lot of sleepless nights and panics, but I think overall there's stories that I really couldn't be more excited about. So they're good. And also the Wait, this creator-owned project I'm doing with Sean Murphy, who's just like a god on the page. So it's been a lot of fun this month.
Well, that's cool. That's exciting. Well, I brought my little, let me see if I can get him here. There he is. Oh, that's Zod. I brought my little Superman in honor of you today, and here's little Zod. You have my new toys. I also got
Nice.
Lone Ranger. It's really cool too. Anyway, okay. Well, we have a ton of questions. All the students are really excited, and they have questions about Superman and Batman and some Severed. We have some
Yeah.
Severed fans out there, which is one of my personal favorites, and American Vampire. And so, and Allie from last, she was in the class last semester when you did it, and she's one who kind of got all feiny. She's in the control room picking out questions, so she's going to probably kick me because I said that. So we'll just kind of go to our first questions and see what people have to say. Oh, this is one of my favorite ones. So this question is from Kai H. And you've written both Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson as Batman, and each had their own take on performed masculinity as part of the role. How did that trait affect how you wrote them?
That's a really good question.
They're all really good questions. They're so
Yeah,
brilliant.
it definitely affected how I write them differently. I mean, I wasn't necessarily thinking of it so much in terms of gender, maybe because I I live in a house with like two little boys, and I feel like they're twice as macho as me all the time. All they want to do is like play monster trucks and ninjas and stuff, and I'm always like, can't we just write a poem or something? So when it comes to those attributes that I think set Dick Grayson apart from Bruce Wayne, it for me it's maybe not quite as gendered as it is a matter of just Dick Grayson being a lot more sensitive, emotionally available, compassionate on the surface. He's sort of a he's somebody who's a team builder. He's kind of open. He's constantly telling you his feelings. And for Bruce, he's interesting to write because he is deeply sympathetic, deeply compassionate. He cares, extraordinarily about his family. But he is, I guess, what you would consider more traditionally, stereotypically masculine in the way that he doesn't show his feelings or talk about his feelings, and he often guards them or lies about them and stuff like that. So I am probably a lot closer to Dick Grayson in terms of my own personality, which makes it a lot of fun to write Bruce because I can be that sort of tough, sort of stoic guy.
Cool. Okay, that's a great answer. Next question. This is from Trevor V. Durham and Eric Mesa. So this is a great question too. How do you approach the gender roles of villains? Do you abandon any masculine or feminine qualities when writing characters like the Joker, Arcane, or Skinner Sweet?
No, and one of the things that I think is real, that's a great question. The way that I think about it really, and because, with the Joker in particular and Skinner Sweet, out of those characters more than Arcane, but Arcane too, I guess. I think the characters, in a lot of ways, they need to represent in some ways uh, the double or the sort of worst nightmare of the hero in such a way where I feel like the best villains are your own fears about yourself, sort of magnified. So in some ways, like when I'm writing the Joker, it's not so much about when he says, for example, like, I'm so scary, and he comes out and he does these terrible things. It isn't so much just that he's frightening, it's that he makes Bruce believe that the worst things about himself are true. And what we're trying to do with something like Death of the Family is to be like, have him to say, I'm your real family, and you love me more than you love your family. I'm your real brother. I'm your real son and father, and all of those things. And so in that way, I try and play with the gender roles a lot of the time, I think, with my villains. Not in a way that I think isn't for me so much about him acting masculine or feminine as it is about him, I guess, bending those sorts of categories. I've always loved Joker, the way Grant Morrison wrote him in Arkham Asylum, and the way he's written in Dark Knight Returns, where there is a tremendous amount of love and affection for Batman. And I don't see it as literal. I don't see it as necessarily he's wants to be in a relationship with Batman, in an actual way. It's more a kind of ecstatic, mad love, where he feels that he's serving Batman by essentially creating these horrible nightmares for him to live through, because he thinks that he's serving him and loves him almost as a jester loves his king. So for me, I think one of the fun things is to have villains that sort of defy some of the roles that you think. Joker doesn't come out and he isn't some big hulking, scary, guy in a way that the classic, I guess, kind of big, movie villains are. And neither is Skinner Sweet. I mean, Skinner Sweet's meant to be somebody who gets under your skin, and if that sometimes, and I often think of those characters as very fluid in terms of the roles they play, I guess, gender wise, in some ways. Like, I think that Skinner would easily isn't sort of, is sure enough in his masculinity, whatever that would be, to be able to, play a role that would be typically more feminine, or what you would think of as feminine culturally, even if it's not necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Do you know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes, that makes total sense. So I always kind of think of, when we asked people what, who's the most masculine character, a lot of people said Batman. And I think a lot of that is because he doesn't have superpowers, and he's, built himself up, and he's, I'm Batman. He's got that voice. And like Devin Grayson said, I think I already mentioned this in one of the broadcasts, but she said she would write for Batman. She would write his lines out and then take at least half of them away, the words away, because he's like that. And that's kind of a masculine trait.
Well, I guess one of the things that's funny about that for me personally is that in my marriage or relationship, I'm the opposite of that, where my wife is definitely the one that's more sort of, I'm more of the one that's kind of like, these are my feelings, and how this is what's going on with me, and I'm so worried about this, this, and this, and this. And she's much more of the rock, in our family. So it's funny, because I really don't. I know that those sort of attributes are attributed, and by all of us, I guess, in some way or other, just historically to gender, or we think of them associated with that. Hopefully, not as much as we used to. But in my life, it's funny, because I feel as though those traits are so usually inverted for me that I often think of them as, I think of like characters that I've written in American Vampire. It's usually the women that are the toughest, all the time, like Pearl and Felicia and Abby and Swamp Thing. And so I often think of Bruce as kind of I don't know, I like to think of Bruce as deep down kind of a softie as well.
Yeah, okay, maybe. I think Superman would be more of a softie than Batman.
Yes, he is.
So, all right, next question. So this is from John Lees and Heather Swanson. In American Vampire, speaking of American Vampire, how does subverting the typical horror trope of female human, male vampire romance alter the gender dynamics of the Pearl-Henry relationship?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I mean, that was definitely a conscious decision when we did it. It was something where I feel like part of the project of American Vampire was to try and make vampires, in our book at least, somewhat scary, and to try and go back to the idea of vampires as this kind of enduring monster, and why they're frightening. as this kind of infection that changes you into this kind of murderous thing, as opposed to something that's kind of exotic and romantic.
And
But the other
sparkly.
part of the project was to create something new that you haven't seen before in the species of the American vampire and in the sort of the structure of the storylines, that it would be a book that would move through different periods and kind of examine American history. And one of the aspects of that was trying to create characters that played on stereotypes, so that Skinner would be, you know, a cowboy or an outlaw, but at the same time he would have certain elements to his personality that really undercut that stereotype. And so the relationship between Pearl and Henry was something that we really wanted to be, you know, the opposite almost of what you see in most movies like Twilight and stuff like that, where the vampire is the man who's kind of this untouchable, romantic, you know, nocturnal animal, and the woman is always sort of, you know, enamored of him. So here we wanted to reverse it, and you know, I think Henry is a strong character in his own right, but we wanted it to be really that Pearl is the one that has that sort of eternal, immortal power, and it becomes more about, you know, it becomes a lot more about sort of what her pull towards darkness and her pull towards, you know, all of these kind of vampiric elements, whereas his concerns are much more grounded in him being vulnerable and human.
Okay. Okay. Next question is from Elizabeth Pfeiffer and Alden Diaz. Did you intend, going back to Batman, did you intend for Harper Row to have a strong combination of feminine and masculine traits from the start, or did she come to have this personality over time?
No, she was definitely meant to be someone that would be a badass. I think from the beginning, that would be both, you know, sort of I guess, a tomboy or somebody that was tough in the way that I wanted to make someone who has had a really hard scrabble life in Gotham, and I've always loved series like Gotham Central, and a lot of Paul Dini's work, where he'll pick a character to tell a story through, tell a short story through, that's just a citizen of Gotham or somebody struggling with real life problems in Gotham, who gets wrapped up in these bigger dramas that involve Batman and the supervillains. And for me, she was a way of sort of looking at what it's like to live in the worst neighborhood in Gotham, and why you would stay there. What kind of person would live there? And for me, I think the thing that's interesting about Gotham is, and we're touching on this a lot actually in Zero Year, is that the city is a place that, you know, you'd have to be out of your mind to live there. I mean, it seems awful all the time. I mean, it's always rainy and gloomy, but you're always terrorized by these horrible things. But I think the thing that people that live there recognize in some way is that if you stay there, the city tests you in a way that if you come out the other side, you kind of become the hero you didn't know you could be. And that, for me, is what Batman stands for in a lot of ways as well. He's kind of almost a crazy manifestation of that. He's kind of this mad knight, you know, in the city. And that, to me, was what kind of Harper sees. You know, Harper needs that. She needs that. She looks up and she kind of needs that symbol that says, you can do the thing that seems impossible to everybody else that you'd be able to do. And so she's always meant to be sort of somebody who, I guess, has a really tough exterior, but, you know, has a really big heart.
I really like that explanation of Gotham City, because I've always wondered, why do people move? It's terrible there.
I know, and in the story, like, there's a line where his father, when Bruce is young, says to him, what do you love so much about Gotham, Bruce? Why do you keep sneaking off there after school? And actually, I wrote it, and then I had to think about it really hard, because I was like, oh, of course he loves Gotham. He always loves Gotham. And then I was like, why would he love Gotham? Like, what? And then I was thinking about it, like, what does that inspire, you know? And I think one of the things about a city, growing up in New York City, I mean, I tried to think about what I love about New York and what I loved about growing up there. And it was that notion that you share the city with everyone else, and you see in them a kind of passion for the people they want to be. Otherwise, they wouldn't live there. Do you know what I mean? They're there to become the thing that everyone says you can't be in some way. And that, to me, is sort of Batman at his core. He's a thing that's almost impossible or ridiculous to become, like a rich guy who could throw money at problems and has this whole other life that he could easily, you know, disappear into. Does the thing that makes absolutely no sense, where he puts his body in front of the city every night to sacrifice it, essentially, to say, I'm going to stop crime. And in that way, I think he's almost the ultimate example of what Gotham loves, which is mad passion. It loves the idea that you would come there and say, I'm going to stick up to all of your crazy monsters and your horrible weather and everything and your explosions all day long and your Joker toxins. And I'm going to stick it out and become the person I came here to be. And that to me is something that, I don't know, that's what I love about Gotham City and what I'm sort of trying to sort of imbue young Bruce with as well.
That's awesome. I like that answer. That was
Thanks.
good. Okay, our next question is from Justin Cober Lake. How do gender norms inform Batman's relationships and issues with the family? Are his trust issues more related to his past, and can these two facets be separated?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. I mean, these questions are great. I don't know that gender norms necessarily inform his relationship so much as just his own sort of pathological and I guess sort of slightly twisted sense of kind of paternal impulse, where I feel like he never really asked to have a family, even though he really did. I mean, I think Bruce would tell you, I didn't ask for this, but he does. He needs the people in his family, even if he won't admit it. So he invites, the existence of a Robin or a Batgirl or that stuff as much as he thinks he does not want it in some way. And in a lot of ways, for me, one of the ways that the Joker story, came about, or one of the things that's most endearing and wonderful and also, scary and I guess touching and human about Bruce is that as a father, you feel those feelings. You feel almost like, I love my kids more than anything in the world. And, there's nothing better than them, but oh my God, if I could only stop worrying about them for like 2 minutes, you know what I mean? And God, did I, if I could just stop thinking about them. And I wish I wish I didn't sort of, need to be afraid of the world all the time. And in that way, I think Bruce is torn the way any parent is, where there's nothing you would want more than your own children. You love them and they're the meaning of your life. And yet at the same time, the burden that comes with them, or the responsibility that comes with them in terms of being afraid for them all the time, is something that I think he struggles with, in a way that's really, really interesting to me and human. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah,
I know
oh,
it sounds,
absolutely.
I don't mean to sound like an awful dad. I
No.
just mean that, you look at your kids and you're like, I love these kids so much. I wish I didn't worry that something terrible was going to happen to them
Yeah, because
24/7.
you can't protect them all the time, and
Right.
and that's probably one of the things, Bruce can't protect them all the time, and he's a protector. That's his job.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and so do you think you could have written that without having kids?
The Joker, no. I mean, the Joker story really was a meditation on that idea of how family always makes you vulnerable to a character like the Joker, and you'll always lose. And Batman does lose in a lot of ways in there, to the Joker, as much as he comes out on top in terms of kind of getting the Joker off the table. You can't win when someone's coming at you with that, saying, I'll always come after. You'll always be vulnerable to me as long as you have these characters, because it's true. As
Mm-hmm.
long as you have children, you're vulnerable to the world. You can't be the tough Batman that you want to be. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And that's a better thing. That's partly what I was saying. Was I was trying to say that Bruce is a better Batman and a stronger man and a stronger person for having this family and letting them in. But
Mm-hmm.
he'll always be vulnerable. He'll always have Achilles heels. And a lot of times, you as Batman, I think about it and I'm like, if I were him, I would wish I didn't have that, as much as the last thing on earth I would wish is that I didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that struggle is part of what makes him really, I don't know, really human. I mean, to me, Batman, Superman too. I love writing Superman because he's so morally torn all the time. In terms of, he knows. I mean, his morals are not torn at all. He knows exactly what he's doing, but he's constantly swimming upstream with his kind of ethical choices, I think, which is makes him so heroic. But Batman is not the same. I mean, Batman's choices to me, or Bruce's choices, are very muddy, and you get behind them sometimes and you think about them and you think, God, I would do that. I agree with that. But he's so layered and sort of mixed up in ways that are incredibly endearing and heroic, and also I think self-destructive, that he's endlessly interesting to me that way.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, next question trying to get to as many as I can.
Yeah, I'll answer shorter.
No, you're great. Keep going. Do what you do. Steve Haley, how would Batman have reacted if he had a daughter instead of a son who wanted to take on the mantle of Robin?
Wow, that's good. Look. I love Dark Knight Returns. I loved Steph. I mean, I love female Robins. So for me, I mean, I don't. It's hard. I never really thought about what it would be like if you had a biological daughter. I mean, that's really a lot of comedy to imagine for Bruce.
Can you imagine whoever took her on a date?
I know. There'd be so much surveillance, right? It'd be awesome. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that it would be that different in terms of, you know, Robin. I mean, I like to think that Bruce is kind of an equal opportunity screw up when it comes to that stuff in terms of being both incredibly protective and a great mentor, and also totally weird about allowing that to be the case, that you would have your loved one out there fighting with you. So in that way, and I'll tell you this, I would love to write a female Robin someday. I mean, I would, if I could enter the Dark Knight universe and write Carrie Kelly as Robin or something like that, in that world, in that future, that possible future, that would be great. I mean, the idea of writing Batman with a female sidekick is something that's really, really interesting to me. And it's one of the reasons I love writing Harper. I mean, and she wasn't designed in some way to become a Robin or anything like that. The idea really was to create a female character that would be a lens to see Batman and Gotham through. It doesn't mean she might never be. I mean, who knows, But, I mean, it's one of the things I enjoy the most about writing that character alongside Batman, too, is there is a fun dynamic between him and a female sidekick, even if only for an issue or two, because I think it does throw him off. Like, he's from a world of men, you know what I mean? And it's funny because people come at me and they're like, how come you never write Batman's love interest? With Superman, there's more of a tension with Lois in that storyline that I'm writing. Spoiler alert. But there's definitely like, his relationship with Lois is part of it. Whereas Batman, I don't know, I'm just not, every time I try and write some romantic interest, unless it's some scene with Selena, it just doesn't feel right. It just feels like he just loves the city too much and loves his mission too much. So he's from that kind of world of, guys helping him and Barbara helping him. And, the idea of a new female character, I think, I don't know. It's interesting to me. I'd love to try it.
Okay. See, we're giving him all sorts of ideas.
Yeah, you are. I'm going to go right.
All right. Next question is from Adam Timothy Dressy Sr. I like this one. I'm a big Swamp Thing fan. How different would the Swamp Thing character be if the host was female instead of male? Would it change the dynamic of the book or the demographic of the audience?
Well, I mean, for me, that's hard to say, only because, I don't know what the audience was for that book. I mean, that there was an audience at all was like a huge relief and thrill, because there was a lot of doubt that there would be whatsoever, especially with him being human for so long and there being no Swamp Thing in it for a while. But what I'd say, I guess, is that, again, and maybe this is kind of what the thing I keep coming back to, with some of the questions, is that for me, The Wake, the book I'm doing with Sean at Vertigo, has a female lead, and she's the toughest person on the submarine, and, Pearl in American Vampire is tougher than Skinner at the end of the day, and so is Felicia, and the same Abby is the one that really is, saves Alec more than anything in Swamp Thing. So I guess I don't really think of it as the heroes in those books like Swamp Thing being particularly masculine, and especially the females characters in those books, I mean, to me are strong and often the stronger characters. So I don't really know. I mean, I'd love to write a female Swamp Thing. It was definitely something else, again, like this is sort of a talking off the cuff, but I did have an idea for an arc in the future that had a female Swamp Thing, but I was getting worried that, I would be taking on too much if I kept on that book and had the other stuff coming up. And I didn't think of it until after I had already said I wasn't going to write it. So then I was like, I had an idea for a couple storylines, and one of them involved that. And I had already said that I was going to sort of step off of it. So you always do that. I feel like where you're like, oh, you know what? I need to move over to this, and then after you do, you have ideas for the character that you.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, you can do a guest spot and
Yeah,
put that in. Yeah,
I
yeah.
will in my fan
I would
fiction.
like that. Your fan fiction. I see your swamp thing there in the background, and I'm like,
Yeah,
oh.
Batman.
And there's your little Batman. Aw.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know. It was Jeff Johns gave me that actually when I started at DC. It was the nicest thing. He sent me this from LA, and it was like it made me feel so like at home at DC. It was really nice of him.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. This is from S. Lynette. Are there any masculine traits from people you've idolized, like your father, uncles, Burt Reynolds, that you find yourself writing?
Nice. You know, I've always, I guess, let me try and be as frank as possible. I have never been a particularly macho guy. I mean, I was always the guy that went to the arts and crafts. Like I went to, for example, and again, like cut me off if I'm rambling in a way that is totally inappropriate. But when I was younger, I went to a sleepaway camp that was all sports, and I don't know if it was like my folks wanted to like toughen me up, and it was all boys. And it was like 8 weeks at a time, and I went from when I was like 7 to when I was like 14, and all I would do was like go up to arts and crafts and kind of hide there, you know, and like and read. My dad sent me comics every Wednesday. My subscription. I would draw. I wanted to be a comic book artist until I got to college and realized that I probably wasn't good enough. And so for me, I mean, I've always, I think, you know, admired those guys that seem really comfortable with those kinds of those kinds of traits or that sort of you know those elements that are just sort of organic to who they are. But I've definitely always been someone who's been, you know, when I was that age, probably nervous about the idea that am I macho enough, am I masculine enough for all that stuff. But at this age, you know, or at least as I got older into my 20s, have sort of embraced the idea of being, you know, less so and just being bookish and being a geek or being whatever you would call it that is, you know, a sensitive guy or anxious or whatever, you know, and that's just more, I guess, who I am, you know, in that way. I mean, it's really funny. I remember being at that camp and they had this thing at the end of the summer all the time called Color War, where when you were chosen for a team, you were chosen for that team for life. And like, so you're either gray or green. And they would do it by waking everybody up in the camp, and the new campers would be taken to this porch that was over the camp on the cafeteria, and they'd pretend to play tug of war with you and pull you to one side or the other. And the night that that happened, I was wearing Hulk pajamas, and I was pulled to the gray side, and they just like tore off my Hulk, my green pajamas, and like threw them away. I was so embarrassed. I was like in my, you know, underoos or whatever, and they were like, "You're gray, you know, you're gray for life." And I always was just terrified of this camp while I was there. And then one summer, Color War, they always wanted it to come down to one point. Like, you know, they always wanted it to come down to like the absolute final day of Color War, so it would be exciting. And one year they decided to make it the arts and crafts point that decided it. And I just been like hiding up in arts and crafts, making this gray Hulk float because I was gray. So it was like a Hulk float that was like a gray Hulk dragon kind of thing. And it won the Color War. And after that, everybody like left me alone. They were like, "That's that weird kid that like does the floats. Leave him alone. He won Color War."
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
that is like I totally apologize for that story, but I had to get it off my
No,
chest.
this is therapy. So there you go. Okay, all right, let's get another question here. This is from Blessed Saint Sean. Is Superman seen as less masculine than Batman because at his heart he is a humanist?
No, I mean, I really think it just depends on again, like you know, in my own life, like the idea of being masculine, for me at least, I mean, it just doesn't sort of apply to the way that I think about what it means to be a father or a husband or that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm a really sensitive, you know, and I guess, or sensitive meaning like, you know, here are my feelings, Jeannie, my wife, or here are my feelings, you know, Jack, my son, in a way that I guess I've always felt okay with. So when it comes to Superman, I mean, Superman or Dick Grayson for me are characters that are much more likely to talk about their feelings, either to the reader or characters around them. You know, Clark doesn't have a lot to hide in terms of what he's going through or what he's feeling. Um, you know, he has his sort of thoughts as Superman to hide from the world, but those feelings are often translated into what he's going through as Clark. I think in a really good Superman story, the issues he's wrestling with as Superman are often, you know, then sort of the things that he talks about as Clark with other people. So there's a kind of transparency emotionally to him that I don't think makes him less masculine or anything like that than Batman. I just think that I mean I would think of it more in terms of like who's more guarded and sort of pathological and interesting for that. You know, I just think that for example, my wife is probably much more well adjusted than I am. I go through periods of tremendous, you know, depression and anxiety and all those things in my life. And I'm much more open about my feelings. She's much probably more of a Batman, and I'm probably more of like a Superman or a Nightwing. But she, you know, in a lot of ways, deals a lot better with struggles. You know, when it comes to things like when we're worried about money, or when it comes to things like one of our kids gets sick. So, you know, it's difficult to sort of, I guess, ascribe those to gender when in my own life those things are so inverted. I guess. Does that make sense? Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yeah, absolutely. See, I think Superman's very masculine, so that's just me though. But I kind of like him. I like Captain America too, and I think they're very much the same. They're both very masculine, but they both are very caring. So they have good
They are.
hearts.
That's true.
So, all right. Next question is from Luna is Honey. Do you plan on writing Batgirl or Batwoman into more future issues of Batman? And what is your take on their role in the Bat family?
Well, I'd love to rate them both. I mean, you know, they're really Batgirl in particular is at the top of my list of characters that I'd love to write. I mean, Gail is doing a tremendous job with her, so you know, but it would be fun to incorporate her into Batman at some point. In terms of their role in the Bat family, I think they stand right beside the male characters as being, you know, just very important kind of individuated forces in the allied, you know, army of Batman. So that Barbara brings certain traits to the table that are really needed when it comes to sort of a wall that's set up around Gotham that are those that's comprised of those characters that Batman is, you know, pulled close to him.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And we have Brett Simon. Simon says stuff. Was the move from Batman battling in terms of actions, masculine Court of Owls, to the androgynous Joker intentional? So moving from masculine court to androgynous Joker.
Well, I mean, I wasn't I wasn't really thinking again, I wasn't the Joker to me is a character that freaks Batman out because he wants to get Batman to admit that Batman loves being Batman without the family. He wants to say, you know that you love facing off with me, that you in some deep way love the notion that you have a villain as wonderful as me to fight because I make you, you know, you're the only one that can stop me and I am the greatest villain of all time. So it sort of inflates you in some way. So it wasn't so much that I was thinking of him as androgynous versus the court that was masculine, I guess, so much as I was thinking of how each of them goes after a different Achilles heel. For Batman, I mean, the court goes after the notion that Batman does not know the city as well as he thinks he does, you know, and that's kind of the way that I try and, I guess, kind of the way that I try and design each story is to go after a particular fear that Bruce has. So for the court, it really was maybe you don't know the city as well as you think you do. You know what I mean? And so you create a mystery that kind of comes closer and closer to Bruce as it goes on. Whereas for Joker, the question was really, you don't love your children enough. You love being Batman more than you love them. And so it became really about, you know, Joker saying, you love me more than you love them. And in that way, I guess you could say he acts androgynous, but it wasn't really a masculine feminine thing so much as it was kind of going after Bruce's fears, I guess, in ways that I hope were, you know, were potent in different ways in each one.
Okay. All right, and we have a question from Gregory Thowing, Guido20. When writing Iron Man Noir, did you base Tony's personality off any 30s to 40s era perceived masculine heroes?
I did. I mean, it was meant. Well, it was meant to be sort of a kind of Doc Savage, you know, Alan Quartermain kind of romp where
Hmm.
at that time I feel like those roles were so much more exaggerated or kind of cartoonishly separate,
Hmm.
and so it was meant to be kind of fun where he is that kind of swaggering you know adventurer in a
Hmm.
way that is both. I tried to sort of subvert it in a way where deep down he is pretty insecure. But I think at that time the idea of trying to play roles where you're living up to this kind of impossible example is fun. So yeah, it was definitely it was meant to sort of play a little bit off of that sort of hyper masculine, you know, adventurer that has the shirt open with the
Hmm.
strap and the whole, that whole kind of romance novel cover.
Yeah, the Indiana Jones. So
Yeah.
that's where my mind immediately goes. Well, a lot of times. So, and let's see who we have up next. We have MJ off centerfold. Dick Grayson is lauded in fandom for being the guy often portrayed visually and characteristically like female characters. Thoughts?
Well, it's hard because Dick Grayson is a character that I probably related to writing in the DCU almost more than any other character. So I totally understand that in the way that I mean I don't think that those are necessarily feminine characteristics, but I think that the things that really separate him and make him a wonderful character to write are his emotional honesty and his vulnerability, how he wears his heart on his sleeve all the time. And in that way, he's a wonderful character to write. And it is funny, you write that character and he has such a female following. I mean,
He
it's
does.
crazy. Everybody were like, more butt shots of Dick Grayson.
I
So I was
know.
always trying to write him in. I'm like, oh, he somersaults here, like so hopefully you get a big shot of his butt or whatever.
Well, I'm sure his whole fan base is thanking you. So,
Yes, if I ever write him again, I promise to do more sort of cheesecake Dick Grayson too.
okay. All right. Next question. Um, this is John Lee's 927. What was your thought process in reimagining Abigail Arcane and her role in the Swamp Thing mythos?
My thinking with that was that as much as I love the old Swamp Thing, and it's both Alan Moore and Len Wein's runs are some of my favorite comics in the world. Abigail had always seemed in some ways like a kind of a romantic lead more than I guess a sort of a partner fighting things. She often needed to be saved or that kind of thing. So for me, I wanted to sort of create a character that wasn't just someone who was a romantic interest or someone who, you know, um, needed Swamp Thing in some way or tethered him to his humanity because he loved her, but someone who was part of the mythology in a way that was central and separate from her relationship with Alec. So that was a big part of the project. I mean, that was a big part of the approval was saying, if I do this book, I want you to let me make Abby the Swamp Thing of the Rot, of the opposing force, in a way that makes her his equal, and one of the reasons that they're attracted to each other is because they're a positive and negative charge.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. And sadly, this is our last
Oh
question.
no, I'm
I
sorry.
know. I know. It always goes so quickly because these questions are just so awesome. Um, so Dave Carter at Dave Reads Comics, he says, does Batman view Gotham City as male or female?
It should be Herm. Batman always says HRM. But
Aha.
I don't know. I mean, someone asked me once because there've been things about is Batman, straight or gay or bisexual or
Mm-hmm.
whatever is Bruce. And for me, he's always sort of Gotham sexual in the way that he or whatever where or he Gotham he loves Gotham too much to really ever have a relationship with anybody outside of that city that's meaningful in a romantic way. That said, I mean, my feeling is I guess I don't know. I hadn't really thought of if he thinks of it as masculine or feminine. When I write it, I do have him say if he had to say him or her, and he's never has. I guess I would have him probably say her, but not because I think the city is necessarily feminine. I mean, I'm thinking out loud, but I think it's more because it justifies his absence of a romantic relationship. I mean, I personally find Batman or Bruce someone who if you took away his mission with Batman, probably would be married, or if his parents were alive, probably would be married to a woman with children and all that
Mhm.
stuff. But because of what happened to him, his love or his wife, his mission is Gotham. And in that way, I think he probably would say her, even though I probably will never say her when I write the book.
Okay. Um, so let's see what you have going on. You have Batman, you're still writing.
Yeah,
You have Superman Unchained.
right.
And can you give us a little hint? You kind of alluded to it a little bit, but what's the relationship with Lois there?
I'm really
Crossing my
glad you asked that
fingers.
actually. The what would have Lois, you know, I'm trying really hard to because I mean Wonder Woman and Superman right now are together if you're not,
Yeah, yeah.
reading Superman. And so that's a really important relationship in his life. But one of the things I'm trying to do with Superman Unchained is, you know, I don't know, pay tribute to some of the classic Superman stuff in a new way. And for me, Lois is always his, his love, and not because she's, just sort of a romantic interest, but I think what attaches Superman or Clark to Lois is that Superman is really alone in the world, and not just because of his power set. I mean, his power set obviously isolates him as the most powerful person on the planet, but I think he's alone in a lot of ways because he's been given a moral compass from his parents, the Kents,
Mm-hmm.
that sets him apart, where he does the right thing in situations where it's really hard to do the right thing. And for me, Lois is the same. She might be a little more brash about it, or she might, break some rules to do it, but she's the person that always goes after the truth and at her own peril. And in that way, I think he sees her as his idol, and he admires her, and that's where I think his love for her stems from. Of course, he's attracted to her. I mean, who wouldn't be? But at the same time, I think that's where the deep attraction and the deep connection comes from. So that's part of what we're going to be exploring in Superman Unchained. But she also has a big plot, an investigative plot as a reporter that winds up playing a really big part in how Superman finds out what's really going on in the story. So she's got I will say this, like, and again, this is like a spoiler alert, but there are a couple times that she seems in peril, and I know you're going to be mad because it's like part of the, it seems like, oh, she's going to need help, but just wait and see the next issue, because Lois is really inventive about getting out of her own death traps in this book. So I
Okay.
hope you enjoy it.
Oh, well, I'm excited for it, and I think you just made a whole lot of students here very happy because we have a big Lois contingent. So
Good.
that's
I'm
that's
glad.
great.
I
And
could
then
I could seriously do this for another hour. I would love to talk to you guys more.
I know. Oh, would you mind to like answer some of the questions via Twitter?
No, let's do it. Let's do a few.
Okay. Well, no, I mean like on Twitter, as,
Yeah, sure.
as
You
on
want me to
Twitter.
read them out?
Um, we have the hashtag GTCB Snyder,
Okay.
and so they're tweeting their questions in, and that would be awesome if you could answer some of them.
Say it again. It's GC
G
GT.
GTCB Gender Through Comic Books Snyder, as in Scott. Um,
Got it.
yeah, and so that's where they're sending all of their questions. So that would be awesome with a huge bunch of fans here, and they have such excellent questions. I'm just
They
this
do.
this class is so impressive. I never want it to end. Um,
GTCB Snipe. Got
yeah.
it. Okay. Let's
Okay.
see.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. I'm looking for a question. It just says Lois. Yes. I love Lois.
I told you that. Well, they were also live tweeting using that, so
Yeah.
you
All
may
right.
have
So
to
let me see.
scroll back a little
Must
bit.
must ask about Nightwing's butt. I'm looking for ask a question quick. Anybody out there? Let me see. Here,
Yeah.
was Joker cutting off his face symbolic of him becoming more honest, open, and bold about his feelings and beliefs about Batman? Yes, he was saying beneath this face is just more Joker, and beneath your face, Batman, is more Batman. But beneath the faces of your fake family is just tender flesh and blood and nothing worth anything. But your real family is in Arkham, and if you cut the Riddler's face off, you just see question marks and more Riddler. So that's what he's saying. All right, let me see. Another
Awesome.
question. Um,
It's okay.
I'm looking. I'm looking. I see there's a lot of statements about Lois being loved. Here,
Yeah.
how did you become involved with the Talon series and a co-writer of the series in general? I became involved in Talon because it was a way of opening the door for a friend of mine, James Tynan, who I think is just a tremendous young writer, who was in class with me when I was teaching about 6 or 7 years ago, and just kept up and kept sending me stuff. And so Talon, I didn't have an idea for a spinoff of the Court of Owls when they asked me, and I mentioned it to him, saying, "Oh, I don't have an idea, and I can't believe they asked me, and I'm not going to do it." And then he came up with the idea for Talon, and I loved it so much that I was like, I would write that if I could. So I was like, let me open the door for you and put my name on it, and I'll help you with the story, but you write it. So that's kind of the way Talon has been going. He scripts it, and I help him with the story a bit, and I couldn't be prouder of him for that. And you should look out for really great work for him from Thrillbent, especially his Eighth Seal book is amazing. But he's
Yes.
also doing Red Hood and stuff like that too, so you should check it out because that's really strong as well.
Yeah, it's and we had an interview with him also, so a short
Nice.
interview, so it was great. All right, well, if you want to stay on Twitter for a little while and answer some questions, that would be awesome. Our we have to wrap up our live portion here.
I have a couple more. I can do a couple more minutes. Let's do it. I'll stay. I mean, if you can, whatever you
Oh,
want to do.
well,
Look.
they're telling me that I have to wrap it up. I would stay here
Oh,
for
okay.
hours.
I could do it too. We should just do it like you and me off camera. We'll just be like going back and forth answering crazy Twitter questions. With no-
Okay, I will jump on Twitter. You jump on Twitter, and we'll do that. But we would like to
Sure.
so thank you for coming and joining our class, and this is wonderful. You have big fans out there. So what's your Vertigo book?
The Vertigo book coming out is called The Wake with
The
Sean
Wake.
Murphy next month. But I wanted to say thank you because I think it's a really great topic and it's a terrific class, and I really appreciate you inviting me on because I think it's something that deserves 10 classes. So it's great.
I do too. Thank you so much, and
Sure.
we'll see you on Twitter.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
Bye.